I can't think of another set of movies where they can range from the best movie ever to holy shit, they should burn the master copies. Hey, what's up, bookworms and constant readers? And today it's going to be constant watchers because today, guys, we're dipping into the multiverse in a different way. We'll be talking about my favorite Stephen King adaptations. Now, guys, a little fact here. Stephen King is the third most adapted author of all time, behind Agatha Christie and some dude named Shakespeare. So we got lots of things to choose from. I think the big misconception over the years has been because there have been some really bad adaptations of Stephen King works that people have just kind of been like, oh yeah, all of his movies are bad. And I don't think that's the case. Look, but you can go on YouTube and you can find all kinds of lists of the worst Stephen King movies, right? So I say, hey, I want to talk about some of my favorite ones because some of them are just absolutely brilliant, and we're going to talk about why. So guys, real quick before I get into it, some honorable mentions because I know there'll be some movies that people are looking for, and I want to explain these are why they probably didn't make my list. First up, Secret Window. Now, I don't know that very many people besides me like Secret Window. I think I like this because the ending was so much better than the short story that's in 4 Past Midnight. I really did like that. I felt like it gave that story a lot more meat, and I thought it was a really good adaptation, although I do see why other people thought it was derivative of other things. Cujo is a movie I think gets a lot of flack, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just because they're actually using a dog, and a man in a suit. They're not using, no CGI, so I think that's what made it really good. The only thing I would critique this movie for, and the reason I think maybe it wouldn't make my top 10, is they wimped out in the ending. King's ending is just vicious, and the movie does wimp out on that. Christine, I think that's a really good flick. Not quite top 10, but it's really up there. I love John Carpenter. John Carpenter, Stephen King, that seems like a match made in heaven, and I think it did a lot of things right, but there's some things that are kind of like, maybe not. The Dark Half, I know a lot of people have this as like their favorite Stephen King adaptation. For me, I like Christopher Walken. He just never really seemed like Johnny Smith to me. I don't know. There's something about the way that they decided to do Johnny Smith in that movie just not right. I didn't even think they got Stilson right for the most part. So it was just kind of a me thing. And then The Dark Half is a movie that I think a lot of people critique, but I think it's just an acting, just the performance, the acting is just great. I think he's playing both roles there, and it's just a really good feature. But there are some things that I actually think is kind of more about the source material than it was the movie that just wasn't going to be top 10 material. Okay, those out of the way, guys. Let's talk about my top 10, and we're kicking that off with Dr. Sleep. Now, the reason that I love the Dr. Sleep, look, Mike Flanagan is one of the few people who understand how to put Stephen King on film. With Dr. Sleep, I think he had the hard task of adapting not only Stephen King's book, but also making it a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And I think he passed with flying colors. I think this is the only adaptation you're going to find out here that I think is better than the book. Because in the movie, you get the Overlook Hotel, and in the book, you get where the Overlook Hotel used to be. And I thought that was just such a kick-ass ending in that movie. It actually took some things in the movie from the original Shining novel that were not in there and kind of gave it full closure, and I really did appreciate how he did that. So just a great adaptation. And what I think I really liked about it is you see these things now where they want to use like CGI version of this actor that's deceased. Mike Flanagan just recast, and it was great. It was great. It didn't bother me at all. It was really well done. So I think that's a great one. Watch the director's cut if you guys get an opportunity. And we watched The Shining, and then we watched the Dr. Sleep director's cut right after it, back to back, when my wife watched it for the first time. Great experience. I think you'll love it. Number 9, I got to go with Pet Sematary. The one from 1989, not that dog shit we got in 2019. 1989, yes, there is some cringy 80s stuff on there. That's going to happen. But I do still think that the screenplay is really tight. Obviously, it's written by King himself. So the screenplay is really good. The acting is really good for everybody except probably Lewis. I think everybody. But I think it really did kind of grasp what that story is about, just showing grief on the screen. Zelda was absolutely terrifying, just like she was in the book, and I don't think it really wimped out on anything. I mean, it really did go all in with, there's children dying, the very, very dark ending. Pascal is incredibly creepy. About the only thing they kind of veered away from was Gage's sister. I can't think of her name right now. Maybe having the shine. I don't know. That's something that we talked about when I reviewed Pet Sematary a while back. But I think this adaptation was about as good as you're going to get, with the budget constraints and, of course, the 80s cheese that was in there just a little bit. I've seen fan edits that kind of take out all the corny stuff and just make it just a straight horror film. It's very good. It's very good. So there's a great horror film in there if you are looking for it, and I think it does still grab a place here in my top 10. Number 8, I got to go with Carrie, the one from 1976. I'll go ahead and spoil it for you guys. There will be no remake versions on here. Carrie from 1976, obviously, Brian De Palma. This was when Stephen King was first becoming known, and this book was a big hit. And then this movie kind of sent him into instant fame right afterwards. So, I can't think of very many movies that have a more famous scene than the ending of Carrie, right? That's just iconic. And I'm not just talking about the pig's blood. I'm just talking about, her walking through the flames and all that stuff. Just an incredibly eerie, creepy. It just gets you one of those things like what I say about is it horror at a certain age. It can't scare you anymore, but it can make you uncomfortable. It can make you be gripping your armchair. Even though it's coming, you can't look away. That kind of horror. And I think that's what Carrie did really pull off really, really well with this adaptation. For number 7, it's one that I feel like when it first came out, people had a ton of problems with it, but I feel like the legacy now, after some time has gone by, people tend to really always list it high when they're doing anything like this. This is The Mist, and I think what this makes this so great is, again, it added an ending that even King has said he wishes he'd have thought of that ending, because the ending, I thought it was, obviously it's haunting, it's tragic. This is a horror story, guys. You're not going to find a lot of Disney endings in Stephen King books, right? And this added something that just made it even more visceral and scary and real, and it was just haunting. And Thomas Jane just completely sold his ass off with this ending. So, Frank Darabont and Mike Flanagan and Rob Reiner seem to be the only people who really understand what makes Stephen King books tick. And that's why I think those guys haven't made a bad Stephen King adaptation. And The Mist, they put out this black and white version that almost made it seem like a Twilight Zone episode. Terrific. And Mother Carmody in that, so damn good. So that's a very good adaptation. I also think that the black and white version hides a little bit of the ugly CGI that might be in there. So I think that actually makes it an even better way to watch the movie. So watch that black and white version if you get a chance. Number 6, I have to go with It. But which one am I going with, guys? It's going to be a very probably unpopular opinion on here, but I'm going with the 1990 version because it was more faithful to the book. I liked a lot about the 2017 It Part 1. I liked a lot about it. The thing I didn't like about it was that it was just trying to be Stranger Things. When I'm like, no, the Duffer Brothers made Stranger Things to be like It. Why are you guys doing this the wrong way? I know they were just trying to capitalize on that resurgence of popularity for all things the 80s was having in the moment. So I get why they made the decisions they did. But what I felt really, really harmed it was when you did the 27 years later and you're in modern day. And why do you think Part 2 struggled? Because it's just, you can't age up these stories. I wish that when they would adapt these movies now, they would keep them in the time period that King wrote them in, because he wrote them in that time period, and that just makes sense. So keeping it in the 50s and in the 1990, I thought that was great. that made it just so good. So again, I love the kid actors from both sets of movies, but the 1990 cast, I'm just going to love it. Look, yes, it's very, very toned down. It was made for TV, guys. It was made for network TV. And they really pushed the envelope for what they could get away with. But still, when all the violent stuff in the book happens, it fades to black or goes to commercial. So that's frustrating. And again, you will see some major budget constraints. Obviously, the final encounter is just hilariously bad. And even the people in the movie have made fun of how that movie ended. But again, Tim Curry just went for it, man. He just went for it. And I like him and Bill Skarsgård's performances. I think they're both great. I just have to lean towards the 1990 version because I do feel like it followed the book much better than the newer versions did, even though I found a lot of redeeming qualities about the new version. But making me pick one, I gotta go with 1990. Number 5, I have to go with Misery, because who doesn't like some cock-a-doodle on a list like this, guys? Obviously, powerhouse acting performance. I think Kathy Bates winning the Oscar was one of those things that made it be like, if you adapt Stephen King stuff faithfully, you actually have some stuff going on. You have some good content here. This isn't just schlock like a lot of the mainstream filmmakers had thought at the time. So it showed that there was something there if you really put what was on the page onto the screen. And I think with Misery, it captured everything. I think the parts of the book that I didn't like, they kind of took out. Obviously you replace the axe with a sledgehammer, and the hobbling scene somehow was worse with an axe than it was with Paul actually having his feet cut off like they are in the book. Somehow that scene was even worse. So again, Rob Reiner does seem to understand what makes Stephen King so visceral, so terrifying. And one of the messages in Stephen King books are always going to be, hey, it's not the monsters that are scary, it's the humans that are the real monsters. And you see that with Kathy Bates' Annie in this. It's an amazing performance that it never gets old. You can watch it today. It's aged wonderfully. And every time they've tried to kind of do something back with this, like I know they tried to do it on that show they were doing, Castle Rock, it just didn't work. It just didn't work. So Kathy Bates will always be what you picture in your head when you see Annie Wilkes. And even if you haven't even watched the movie, I feel like you know enough scenes of it by now, just through pop culture, that is going to be Annie when you read this. But yeah, great book, great movie. I think it's all just acted very, very wonderfully. And it's a very, very tight script. It even adds an element and adds a character to it, which I actually think works out okay. So I'm not one of those that has to be a page-for-page adaptation of a Stephen King book. If it's used for narrative purposes, I think it's great. I just don't like when they take characters out and then add a new one. That's what really frustrates me, is when they do stuff like that. But yeah, that's where I am at for right now. And I just realized, guys, I don't have Gerald's Game on here, and I'm very upset with myself. But I've already started recording. I'm not going to start over. Gerald's Game would be on here somewhere. I don't know where. Damn it. This always happens to me. This is why I can't do lists like this, guys, because they change usually 5 minutes after I'm done, but not while I'm still going. Anyways, let's just go ahead and finish with where I was. Number 4, The Green Mile. Again, Frank Darabont flexing his Stephen King muscle here. This might be the most faithful adaptation on this list because it is literally damn near page for page. It doesn't do everything because the book is going to be a little longer than the movie. But it doesn't do a lot of the stuff of Paul Edgecombe when he's older in the nursing home. It doesn't do a lot of the stuff that's in the book there. It kind of takes that out, except the beginning and the ending of that. And it doesn't do some stuff with what happens to Paul after what happens at the events of the prison. But everything that is actually real time with Tom Hanks playing Paul, that time period at the prison, damn near page for page. It's amazing. I think that Michael Clark Duncan, his performance as John Coffey, will just have you just enamored and then of course in tears, because it is a very, very sad movie. And I challenge you to make it through this movie without crying. I cannot. It is absolutely just gut-wrenching. But yeah, it's a beautiful book, and it's just as good of a movie, which is very, very rare for me to say when it comes to a Stephen King adaptation. But that's one of those kind of movies, like I could finish watching it and I could just start over and play it again. It's just so damn good. So wonderful, wonderful adaptation. And Frank Darabont, I hope he eventually does The Long Walk. I know he's talked in the past that he wants to do it, and every time The Long Walk gets attached to someone, it falls apart. And I see that recently it's fell apart again. So Frank, what are you doing? I would love to see you do The Long Walk. Number 3, guys. Got to go with The Shining, 1980. And I know right now I got constant readers saying, Mike, what are you doing, you fraud? How can you put this on this list when it's so different than the book? Well, guys, every once in a while there is this rare case where the book and the movie can be kind of different, but they're both terrific. And this is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I think the reason this kind of gets heightened with constant readers is because of Stephen King apparently saying like he hated the adaptation, whatever. I think that's kind of been blown up a little bit. Look, Stephen King was just becoming a superstar when The Shining came out and they were adapting this. And he went to the movie set, and if you don't know anything about Stanley Kubrick, he's quite headstrong, and apparently he got annoyed with Stephen and he threw him off the set. And I think that was obviously going to get a strong reaction from Mr. King. And I think that's kind of what it's been over the years is, oh, Stephen King hated this movie. What Stephen King said was he didn't like how Stanley was doing Jack Torrance in that, because he said he felt like Jack was a lunatic before he got to the hotel. And I think that's just Jack Nicholson's style of acting. Jack looks a little, and I think that's, great. but he does have a problem being a little bit more reserved. Even when he's reserved, he kind of looks a little crazy, right? So I don't know. I think that's been kind of blown up a little bit. I think this is a great flick. Obviously, again, it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I think The Thing might be the only horror movie I like more than this one. This was kind of the movie that kind of got me into Stephen King. This and It 1990. It was just it's timeless, right? I mean, here's Johnny. I mean, moments that aren't even in the book that are in that movie are some of the things that make it great, right? You know, the twins and stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff that's in the movie that you don't get in the book. Like all work and no play, that's not in the book. You know, these are great things. So I think that there's a place for both of these, and on a certain path of the beam, I think they might be one and the same. Who knows? But I think that it's a great movie, and I feel like I would be cheating myself if I didn't put it on this list just because it's a little different than the book. Number 2, guys, you know me, I love me some coming of age, and one of the greatest coming of age movies of all time is based on one of the greatest coming of age novels of all time. That is, of course, Stand By Me, based on the body novella from different seasons. I think Stand By Me might be such a perfect movie to me in some ways because I was the age those actors were when the movie came out. You know, obviously that was going to kind of settle in for me. It was like this big secret. We thought it was this big secret that our parents had no idea that we cursed and talked like these kids talk in this movie. You know, and now that I'm that age, I'm like, yeah, I know you talk like that behind my back. It's quite okay. You know, but I think that I was able to relate to those characters, even though, you know, they were in small town Maine in the 1950s, you know, but it was kind of like, you know, I was talking about how we had like that resurgence of popularity of the 80s. It goes on like 30-year cycles. So guys, in the 80s, we were enamored with the 1950s. You know, that's just kind of was. 30-year cycles. Check it out. Do the math. It works. But I think that this movie has just got so much heart. And the kids just wear their emotions on their sleeves. You know, they're just hanging on by a thread from what these kids' home lives are like. You know, and I think that when they're together and they're out there in the wilderness alone, they're not just coming of age in that they're going to see a dead body. You feel like your innocence dies, but they're all getting out these demons that they feel like they can only let out around each other. And I think that's just beautifully portrayed on the screen, just amazingly acted. River Phoenix, Gone Too Soon, you know. But it's a great movie. It's a great movie, and I showed it to my oldest kid, and he loved it. So it's one of those movies I think is going to translate no matter what generation you show it to. You know, my kid wasn't like, hey, where's their iPhone? Like they're fine. He was fine with it, and he really did like it. And I think it's just a beautiful movie. And it just kind of captures all those endless summers that, you know, you felt like you had as a kid, if you had that. You know, back in the days when we were, you know, bicycles and, you know, come home when the street lights come on, that generation. And guys, number 1, I'm pretty sure you've probably figured it out at this point. It might be the popular pick, but I feel like it's the popular pick for a reason. This, of course, is The Shawshank Redemption. Frank Darabont, again, this guy is just unstoppable, right, when he does Stephen King material. Funny thing is, I remember going and seeing Shawshank Redemption. I was pretty excited about it. Went and go see it opening night at the theater. Empty. I was the only person in the theater. So yes, guys, this was a box office bomb when it came out. It did not gain popularity until VHS and, you know, showing on TBS and things like that. Over time, it has become one of the most popular movies of all time. But upon release, it was ghosted. No one was there except me, apparently. But I think that it captures everything that short story will tell you about hope when it seems like you are in a hopeless situation. And it captures everything about the friendship between Red and Andy. So anytime you have a journey between, you know, two platonic men in a hell situation like Shawshank Prison, and basically they are each other's like true north, I guess you'd call it. They basically keep each other from going insane when they're in this prison. And I think it's just a wonderful story because Andy is doing all these things to try to better the situation at Shawshank. He's trying to help people that are there. He's trying to better the situation. He's trying to be a bright spot in the darkness. And I mean, that's just something that you can see all these people are in there. You know, there's no guilty men in Shawshank, right? These are hardened criminals, obviously. You know what? And in the end, you're human. You know, and I think that this and The Green Mile both did that. It really did humanize the convicts, you know, in a way that you wouldn't imagine when you first start reading it or watching it. But this definitely, I mean, there's just so many great moments in this. The soundtrack is incredible. Everyone is perfectly cast. I mean, I think to this day, we still get parodies of Red kind of narrating people's life story, right? So I mean, that's just Morgan Freeman has just been kind of like become like a meme at this point, and it's all because of this movie. So I think it's a movie that's absolutely beautiful. And if someone said it's the best movie of all time, I wouldn't argue with them. It's not my favorite movie ever, but it's up there. It's a great damn movie for sure. But yeah, I can't find really one thing wrong with that movie except that it ends. But it has such a beautiful ending that you just gotta just give me 5 more minutes. That's kind of how you feel spending the time with those characters and what they go through. So an amazing journey, an amazing movie. And yeah, these movies here, and even though, like I said, I left Gerald's Game off, now I feel like I've got to redo this list. But hey, this is what happens, guys, when you do these live and you don't feel like starting over. So if I'd have to shuffle it, if I had to kick one off, I guess I'd have to kick Dr. Sleep off, move everything down one, but I don't feel like I want to do that. I don't know, but I feel like Gerald's Game should be on this list. So that's my bad, Mr. Flanagan. That is my bad. Big one that I feel like I'm going to probably get railed for is Salem's Lot, the Salem's Lot TV miniseries. The thing with that is just it hasn't aged as well as you might think it has. I know that people that watched it when it was on TV, it scared the hell out of them, and I got nothing against that. I'm just saying, going back and watching it when I did in the 90s, it was a little too 1970s for me. There are some scary moments. I think Barlow's pretty terrifying in the movie, and of course the window scene's great. But yeah, I don't think I'd put it as one of my favorites. But I do think that they could really remake this movie and make it really, really great. And I think they have, but now it's just like sitting in a can somewhere, because nothing Stephen King adaptation can be made without going through development hell first, for whatever reason. So guys, those are my 10, or I guess 11 since I missed Gerald's Game, favorite Stephen King film adaptations. I would love to know your favorite, and you know what, go ahead and rank them down below if you feel like it. I would love to hear what you think. So what is the big one that I left off that you would love for me to talk about? Is it Maximum Overdrive? Because guys, I got a lot of love in my heart for Maximum Overdrive. It might be my favorite bad movie of all time. Drop in the comments, guys, and let me know, and I will talk to you there.